All right, welcome back everybody. So this is it. This is officially part one on the road to air ride. So we are going to start from the front of the car today. We're gonna take the old control arm out and we're gonna mock up my new control arm with the new bracket design that I was showing you probably in the first video. We're gonna take a look at that up close here in a minute, and then we're gonna just take the old stuff off and then put this up on there, and then we're gonna just start trimming away the pieces that we need for clearance in order to mount our top bag mount. And also we're gonna just start test fitting airbag at ride height and fully deflated, make sure we get it set exactly where I want. My goal is to, with this car and this build, is to have the thing lay completely out on the frame. That's my goal, or as close as possible, and then be able to lift it right up to the ride height that I want. And there'll be just maybe a little bit higher that I'll be able to come up with it, you know, if I have to for clearance reasons, but that's my main goal. I want a really nice ride height, and then I want to be able to just lay the whole thing out completely on the ground. So this design that I did for the front control arms, if you noticed in the first video, it sets the bag down low here. So we're gonna just go skip to that right now, take a look at that, and then we'll start taking the old stuff out of the front and then just get into it. Okay, so I started with just a factory lower control arm. First thing I did was I notched out a little section here. I think it's roughly like an inch in, mainly to make clearance for the air spring to move forward. So if you can remember, the transverse spring on this car sits up here. So I wanted to make sure I moved the air spring forward, mainly just for leverage, that you can get more range with the bag the closer it is forward. So I ended up using a C-channel that actually fits perfectly along these rails on here. So when I make these back and front supports, they're gonna be hanging down on it, kind of equally dispersing the weight of the car throughout the whole control arm. So as you can see, there'll be a back support here, and then there is the front support here, which comes around the back, and then it'll have this plate here, which will have a grade 8 bolt going through there, and another big plate here holding that in there. So you have many points where all the weight of the car is kind of equally dispersed throughout this whole control arm here. And this is just a prototype right now. I just have it all tacked in place. I will gusset and make reinforcements on here so it's nice and strong and it's not going to go anywhere, and I will tie everything together. These two pieces here will accept that lower airbag or air spring plate, and it'll sit up in there real nice and snug. And therefore it's not going to rub anything, because it will get a little wider when it's fully compressed. Then the next big thing that I decided to go to after just playing around with prototypes, as you can see, this sits down lower than the control arm. I believe it's like 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches lower. And if you can see how that air spring's sitting in there, so there's not that much room on the top of the car where I'm going to put that top plate. So in order to get full range out of this thing, to completely compress it down and have still a low ride height, I sunk the air spring down into the control arm, like I said, about half an inch or so. Sorry, 1.5 inches or so. So that should give me, in theory, the range that I need, ride height, deflated, all that good stuff. But now we're gonna just go get this in the car, and then we're gonna play around with that. We're gonna figure out where we're gonna have the ride height at it with this installed height, and then where it's gonna look like fully, you know, deflated. So we'll put the wheel back on the car too, and we'll just kind of run this up in motion and check all that stuff out to make sure we have this where we have to before we weld everything up. All right, so I got the control arm hung here with the bracket in here, and as you can kind of see here, there's going to be a couple pieces, this apron in here, and in here, these pieces that mount that shield I was talking about. We're going to cut that out here, cut this section out in here, and then also this bracket piece here in the frame to make room for our airbag. I'm going to show you a couple things. So this, obviously, as we travel upwards, it would hit in here, this lower bracket. Now, with the air spring in here, like that, you can see that we're gonna be mounting it right up in here like that. That's why we have to remove that piece. And then our upper bracket, we will modify this a lot shorter to sit it up in here. But it's gonna go roughly right around there, as close as up here as possible that I can get to access the top bolts and have the fitting in here like that. So, kind of hard to see, but this will sit in here like that. And then this is pretty level here, which will be kind of like ride height. And then it'll compress all the way up once this thing goes up. But we're gonna go ahead now, mark all these pieces in here and just start removing that and then checking everything for clearance, and then we'll be able to mock everything up a little bit better. So I'm gonna just go ahead and mark everything, pull this back out, and then start cutting everything to make room. All right, so I just got done cutting everything up. I'm just gonna kind of show you exactly where I cut. You can see around here is where I cut, and then I cut all the way up along here, underneath here, and this is where the top plate's gonna go, across there. And the other thing too was this piece down in here. I cut here, and then I cut up here a little bit too to clear this bracket. And now I can show you all the clearance. I mean, that's hitting there, if you can see that. And that would probably be way past completely deflated. So right there shows me that we have plenty of upward travel. If I do need a little bit more, it's kind of hard to tell without that top airbag bracket on there, but so far we pretty much have everything cleared out. And if we had to, we can just come in here and just trim this up a little bit if possible, but it seems like we're gonna have more than enough room. I just want to show you what I did with my top bag mount here. So I ended up using this piece that I got, and then I ended up just making a template and cutting this down smaller here to fit in there. So that's pretty much going to be the size difference there that we're going to use. Instead of trying to fit this big giant piece in here, I'm going to cut it down so it's tight, and then I'm going to end up just gusseting it in real good underneath there for strength. But I'm gonna just go ahead and bolt this to the top of the bag here, and then we're gonna go tack it in the car and see how it fits. All right, so I got the top mount just kind of tacked in place over here. So I'm probably gonna end up opening this up a little bit in here, just to clear room for the fitting here, because I want to try to move this back in here as much as possible, just to keep clearance for the shock there. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just put this all back together loosely, and then put the wheel on it, and then just play around with the ride height here. Okay, so that's completely compressed with the control arm hitting right there. So I measured the bag, and I still have 1 more inch to come up with it being fully compressed. So that sits up in a really nice, but with that 1 more inch, that whole tire is going to probably be sitting up in there, which is kind of what I'm going for there, and then be able to raise it up and have a really nice drivable stance. So I'm going to go ahead and notch out that control arm and make sure that fits, but it looks like this setup is going to work out really well. Okay, so I just notched out the rest of the frame there, so I have that completely deflated right now. And the only clearance issue is the fact that the tire is actually hitting the inside of the hood. Other than that, it could probably come up a little bit, but that's what it's gonna look like when it's aired out, laying on the ground. All right, so far so good. So the mock-up's going really well. The bracket I designed for the lower control arm is working out the way I wanted it to, which is nice. So we'll have a really nice ride height, and we'll also have plenty of clearance to lay this thing completely out on the ground when we're done. So next things are, obviously we gotta support that top bracket and start welding and putting all this stuff together in the front. We do have a long way to go here, but we're making good progress. So if you enjoyed the video, press like, subscribe, and stay tuned.